Welcome to episode 115 of the Omnigamers Club podcast, the podcast for games on all platforms, including the New York Scavenger Hunt. I am Daniel Winter.
And I'm Mark USA. Hello. How's it going?
Hello, Mark. Yes, hi. We managed to get a game in yesterday, so not been long. Last days of summer here. Kid going back to school tomorrow. We've got some games that we played yesterday that we'll be discussing later. But yeah, we've got a lot to discuss today. Our three-course meal of games.
That's right. It's always a little sad for summer holiday to end, but I was working the whole time, so it wasn't really a holiday for me. And the kids go back to school, and it is nice to kind of be on a regular schedule, right? At least for a while.
I'm looking forward to knowing what day of the week it is again.
That's right. The school schedule will do that for you. All right, let's roll into our course number one, that being the appetizer course. What do you have for us, Daniel?
Yeah, nothing particularly, no single topic today. I just wanted to do a bit of a grab bag, catching up on a few smaller games that I've been playing. Just firstly, very quickly, I wanted to say that if you enjoyed, or if you found interesting our discussion last week on sort of gambling and games, a podcast I'd recommend is Side Stories, which I've been looking for an excuse to recommend regardless. That is a relatively new podcast from basically an offshoot of Friends at the Table, the actual play podcast from Austin Walker and friends. I think it was a couple of episodes ago they were talking about basically Tamagotchis and Labubu and like Magic the Gathering packs and how those all basically can be condensed into various forms of exploitative gaming culture there. So lots to dig into there. And very thoughtful voices. So I'd recommend checking that out. So as for games I've been playing, I did recently tease that I'd finished Xenoblade Chronicles 3. So that's something like 300 hours for the trilogy of games over the last couple of years. And I didn't want to do like a featured review of that, even though I do have a lot of thoughts. Partly that we've already sort of banged that drum quite a bit and talked about that series. And I also just came out fairly whelmed on that game. It, by far, I think, is the most accessible and polished of the series. It's very responsive with the combat mechanics. You've got 6 party members all at once, and it's very real time combat. So yeah, it's quite thrilling seeing this huge ensemble of characters running around, and it is an incredibly interesting cast. Basically, the concept is like this forever war. You've got these two nations basically fighting each other to extract each other's life forces over the hundreds of years or however long it's been, and you've got the scrappy young crew from either side who manage to rebel against the system and go against basically try and break the cycle, go against the larger systematic forces, which is a theme I can definitely get along with. So I did enjoy that. It did just play out that theme over 100 hours and kind of stretched it thin a bit by the end there and played the same beats a little too much because it's very formulaic in that you meet different communities, and each community has to have their own excuse for now joining the rebellion, basically, and very sort of forced and fast-tracked sort of excuses for why they're suddenly going to reject their whole culture and now join this rebellion. So cool theme. I think it was a bit stretched out by the end there, and I do think that the thing about the combat mechanics is as much as polished as it was, it was the same thing for 80 hours. Like, no enemy was ever fought in any different way than the first Babbitt that you fight out of the gate. Like, you press the same button. It's wait for the cooldown, press the button. Wait for the cooldown, press the button. I know a lot of people do like the tactics in that series, but it's more about sort of the theory crafting before you go into the combat and setting up your classes and your gear and making number go up. And that doesn't particularly interest me, to be honest. So yeah, it was an engaging game. I did enjoy all the characters, but I don't know that I'd recommend spending 300 hours on it.
Yeah, I think people have already heard my complaints about Chronicles 1 and Chronicles X. The combat, just a real dud. But I do own Chronicles 3, so maybe I will. I heard it's the best of the bunch, so maybe I will actually give that a whirl over the upcoming holidays, and maybe we'll have a deeper dive into it in the future.
Yeah, happy to revisit that. I will say I'm surprised that I think my favorite is the first one, Xenoblade Chronicles 1. I mean, I did play the remaster of that for what it's worth, but even as weird as the combat mechanics were in that, you had more options. You had like a whole like toolbar of like 10 different abilities you could use rather than just 3 at a time. And the story was just had this real escalation. Like it was a very anime story, obviously, but it just kept escalating and escalating and escalating, like getting weirder and more out there as you go along. So I found that structure of the story more engaging.
Yeah, the protagonist in one had the Monado, which is the special super sword of legend, which was a little bit cooler than the other characters had. So at least that made it stand out a little bit.
And one thing I will say about 3 is it skipped the fan service from number 2, which was pretty gratuitous, I will say.
Yeah, I heard 2 was a bit skeevy.
Yeah.
I haven't played it though.
I would skip 2, to be honest.
All right, good to know.
So, secondly, I just want to quickly follow up on some thoughts on Bonanza. I did a somewhat thorough review of that recently, but I have since finished that game.
Do you mean Bananza or the Uwe Rosenberg classic Bonanza?
Ooh, beans. This is the Donkey Kong game, basically. And I've since finished that. If you've listened to that previous episode, you will know that I was fairly whelmed by that as well, and the overall structure and constant little drip feeding of micro dopamine hits. I do think the second half of this game is a lot better. It tends to have a lot more momentum. Like some of the later sort of third, I think, has some pretty small scale worlds that keep you moving forward more consistently without so many distractions. And then like the final set piece, I would say, without spoiling anything, is actually a series of set pieces that were quite thrilling and tying back to both like the Donkey Kong's roots, both the original Donkey Kong arcade game, Donkey Kong Country, and the little Mario Odyssey too. So it brings everything full circle in a quite satisfying way. The overall structure, though, I still remain pretty indifferent to. I see the checklist of another 500 bananas that I could go back and find. Maybe if I've got some podcasts to catch up on, I might go back and grind those out at some point. And my daughter's still having fun, but I think I'm largely done with that.
Got it. Yeah, I'm interested to see where Bananza goes. Obviously, I don't have a Switch 2 yet, but I hear that's kind of like the star of the moment for that platform.
Yeah, we've got a couple new games coming out in September that I'm excited for. Silk Song just around the corner. Probably by the time you're listening to this, it should be out. And Final Fantasy Tactics coming out. I mean, these obviously aren't Nintendo exclusives. That's where I'll be playing them.
Cool. Yeah, I actually heard. You and I were talking about Final Fantasy Tactics, and I think I told you I'm not going to pick it up because I still have my Vita. I still have a PSP. I can play the last remake of that game because this is a PS1 game, after all. The last remake that came out 10 years ago. But interestingly enough, apparently on social media, the game director said that, in not so many words, that they had to go back to archives and fan archives and other sources to research the game because they'd lost the source code. So I thought that this game looked pretty much like not that different from the original, and I still don't think it does look that much souped up, which is, I don't really care about that. I think this is a great opportunity for new players if they haven't had a chance to play the original Tactics or the remade War of the Lions version. It's still such a solid game, and hopefully they've tweaked some of the difficulty curve. So I recommend it, but I myself, I don't think I'll pick it up because I still have yet to beat the original first remake.
Yeah, I'm just excited to have it in a fairly accessible platform to play it on. I mean, we've talked about this before. It has been available on mobile, but that's not a platform I want to be playing like long stretches of sort of beefy games of that.
Yeah, I specifically warn people not to do the mobile versions on tablet or phone because the saves are not really great. I've lost many dozens of minutes playing on a particular chapter while I had to close my phone to access, plane tickets or something like that. So, not recommended.
Excellent. Well, I'm actually going to do a little sidebar here. Instead of an appetizer, I'm going to pivot to the kids menu. And over the summer holidays, I have been playing more games with my daughter. She's becoming much more engaged and broadening her gaming menu. So one that I've been playing a lot of that I picked up in Australia is called Mooki Island. This is a game from Florian Silviu, I think is how you pronounce that, published by Scorpion Masqué. It's came out this year. And it's a really fascinating little exercise in that it is obviously designed for kids and it is a 2-player only game. So it very much feels like it's designed to be a parent and child introduction. I couldn't see 2 kids, maybe 2 12-year-olds perhaps, but for the age range, I think the idea is that it's a parent introducing their kid to this. And it's a very simple game. You've got a stack of tarot cards. Each side has a sort of Pokemon-style critter on it. They're all very fairly elemental versions of animals, essentially. Each one associated with like an elemental symbol. And when you take a card, you look at both sides, you choose one to keep, you put it in your stack. And at the end of the game, you're going to see who has the most of each symbol. And if you've got the most leaf symbols, you get a little sigil that's worth some points. If you've got the most sun symbols, you get a little sigil that's worth even more points. It's like the value of these symbols is slightly different. But it's a very basic set collection sort of majority game. It feels like a bit like a sort of Reiner Knizia in its elegance in that regard. There is some strategizing going on. It does feel like memory would be a big factor here in that you could know which creature is on the opposite side of each, like what the opposite side that you don't see until you draw it. I say that I have no chance of memorizing any of these after playing this like a dozen times, and I've still not managed to figure it out, because some of them are like these special foil legendary creatures that are, like give you 2 sigils, and there's only like 5 of those in the game. There's also a little take that element. There's these spiders that you can give that will like lose points if you've got the majority. So there's a decent little, there's room for a decent degree of sort of strategizing here as an introductory kids game. And I mean, part of the big appeal for kids in this is that it comes with this sort of fold-out map of all the critters in the game. And each time you play, you get to name some of those creatures. And so you're creating this sort of universe and Pokedex, if you will, and building out this sort of theme and setting for yourself, and it's a bit of like not quite role playing, but world building, shall we say, as you go along. And of course, like my daughter is naming everything Sparkle Cat and Sparkle Bat and Sparkle Bug. Like not the most original of names, but she's having a lot of fun doing it.
Cool, sounds good. Maybe it'll be a repeated segment. In fact, I have a couple of games to talk about that might be considered kid worthy later on in the show. So we'll talk about that in a moment. All right, my segment for the appetizer will be fairly short. I think I said last episode that I was getting a little bit tired of, just kind of being like a marketing shill. Is like, we enjoy talking about games, some pretty obscure older games, definitely not the latest hotness most of the time. So I don't feel too bad about talking just about the games I'm playing. I don't try and become part of the marketing machine wherever possible. Anyways, I'm just going to mention this crowdfunding campaign just because I thought I would be against it. Then I ended up changing my mind, so I want to just kind of be open about that decision there. This is about Cypher, the TTRPG, entering into its 3rd edition. I don't know if it's officially called 3rd edition, but it is basically the latest one. There's a campaign on BackerKit right now. And the primary difference with... I've talked about Cypher in the past. Mm-hmm. It's explicitly a genre-neutral system. And they have dedicated setting books such as Numenera or The Strange that you can play in from Monte Cook Games. But they also sell, interestingly enough, these kind of genre books. So you can pick up like the Cyberpunk Cypher book, or you can pick up the Wild West, Weird West book, or the one about, cozy witches or things like that. So they have the horror version. They have a lot of flexibility there. And this latest version, what it's focusing on, from what the marketing material shares, is that they want to make things a little bit easier to jump into. So the character creation flow has always been interesting for Cypher. For instance, you make up this basically a sentence. I am a adjective, noun, that verbs is what you create for every character, and it's quite involved and interesting. And they're not going away from that, but they're providing a few more like kind of pre-selected options. So instead of having these kind of 3 core classes, and forcing you to reuse those for every genre, they're actually kind of providing you with some more of the expected classes. Yeah, you're going to get the barbarian, you're going to get the druid for fantasy settings, and you might get the hacker or the netrunner for cyberpunk, for instance. So that's one difference. And the second part is that they're adding something called the divination deck, which, as you might imagine, sounds like a kind of like a tarot inspired thing for kind of generating chance or kind of directing the flow of the story. So not a lot of detail left yet on that, but that's a new component that you've seen in some smaller kind of more indie TTRPGs, so you don't really see that much in you haven't seen in Cypher yet. And just recently I found out, this was the real clincher for me, that my favorite Monty Cook game setting, The Strange, has been announced that it's getting updated for the latest edition of Cypher. And in 2 of the campaign pledge levels, you get the new edition included. So there's the all-in PDF version or the all-in printed book version. You get the Cypher system book included in both cases. And I backed at the PDF all-in level because it's just like a ridiculous wealth of options. Like I would share, we will share the link, but there's literally like dozens of setting books that will get included in this pre-written adventures.
There's a new setting books.
Yeah, there are.
The old ones that are compatible.
The all-in campaign will basically include pretty much everything except like the very last new campaign material that they came out with. So pretty much like 98% of the entire catalog from the last 20 years is all coming out for about $99 US for the PDFs. So that's an incredibly good deal. I thought it was worth it. And The Strange is my very favorite. Basically, The Strange, I've said it before, is kind of like X-Files meets Sliders. You are traveling between dimensions and you're working for a kind of cryptic agency that deals with the otherworldly, but otherwise set in a modern world. So I really like that setting a lot, and I'm excited to see the new edition of that.
Awesome. So that's the only setting that they've sort of rejuvenated for the new edition?
Yeah, you'll get the old settings as is. They have ones like Gods of the Fallen, Predation. Predation is kind of like they made a TV show about like modern people going back to dinosaur times. There's one that's kind of like a pretty much, what is it? Weird West. It's Path of the Planebreakers. There's First Responders, which is like a kind of a real world like heroes, like just like regular everyday heroes kind of a setting. And they have like, I think 10 of the genre books. So they have the horror, they have the sci-fi, they have the fantasy, they have the superheroes, post-apocalyptic, cozy, which is cyberpunk, and cowboy western. So all of that, there's just so much stuff in there. Anyways, I'm sounding like a shill, so I'm going to stop talking now.
Well, you've already well experienced with the previous incantations of that, so you know somewhat what you're expecting.
That's right, and I really like Cypher, and I already think it's a pretty streamlined system. So I'm excited to see if there's even better tools and better writing to ease new players into trying it out.
Excellent. Okay, shall we get to the main course?
Let's do it. Do you wanna start us off with your game?
Sure thing. Okay, so this week I'm going to be reviewing Mass Effect, the board game, Priority Hagalaz, that I will try not to pronounce Hagendas every time. So this is designed by Eric M. Lang and Calvin Wong Se-Loon. Artist is David Benzal and published by Modifius Entertainment. Came out in 2024. So before I dive into this, Mark, what's your experience with the Mass Effect franchise?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you because I'm wondering, is Hagalaz a thing from the video games?
I believe it was part of the Shadow Broker expansion in Mass Effect 2, which I didn't play.
Got it. To answer your question, I have played through the entire trilogy. I played it over a number of years, but it's been long enough that I don't remember all the specifics. I just remember kind of key moments, some of the characters that I liked a great deal, and I have a generally positive feeling about the trilogy in that part of the series.
Yeah, I mean, I played the original when it first launched and was a pretty big fan of that. I have tried at least 3 times to get through 2 and just keep bouncing off every time. And I've, for the life of me, been trying to figure out what it is about that part. Like, I suspect part of it is just my completionist and, like, trying to resist the urge of not going in and 100%ing the survey of every single planet and burning out on that. I have started to realize that part of it is just a little bit of burnout on the writing style in that franchise. And I mean, it's BioWare more broadly has it's some similarities to the sort of Marvelification of writing these days, even if BioWare predated that to a large degree. But that sort of irreverence and the wisecracking, did that just happen? Sort of dialogue that I'm a little bored of these days, to be honest.
Yeah, that is really more of like that was borrowed from the kind of Joss Whedon style of irreverent kind of ensemble cast writing. And what is Mass Effect if not an ensemble cast drama? I mean, companions are the heart of those games.
Yes.
And I was just going to say, of two has some of the most interesting or the some of the most beloved companions of the whole series. So I'm interested to see that you weren't able to sink your teeth into it. I enjoyed that game quite a bit. I think the three in a trilogy often ends up being kind of the vanilla one. So I think 2 is not the best, but I enjoy it for its differences.
I know 3 had its controversy with the different coloured lights for the ending. We're so far removed from that now, and I'm so removed from expectation that I'm kind of half expecting to like 3 when I eventually get around to it. We'll see.
Very nice. Yeah, let's talk about the board game, though.
Let's get back into that.
So
yeah.
You and I played this, but you're telling me you've completed the entire campaign. Is that right?
Yes, I played through the whole campaign solo, which might sound like a huge feat. It's actually not, in that this campaign structure is only 5 missions, and 2 of those are optional. You do 3 core story missions, and in between those you can choose 2 optional loyalty missions for your companions. So it's a pretty focused, restrained sort of structure, which is something I can really get behind as someone who's never going to finish, the 100+ missions in Gloomhaven, or even the 20+ in Oathsworn that I've been struggling to get through for the last 2 years. And like you could sit down and blast through this in a day if you're really focused, or over the course of a week, like I did. So I can really appreciate that. The actual overall structure is sort of tied together by these narrative moments. There's a narrative book with sort of numbered headings, and it will tell you to start with this entry, and that will direct you to the first mission, and then that in itself will direct you to X or Y based on the results of that. So basically, this narrative book sort of daisy chains you between the missions pretty organically, I found. At least it would if the layout wasn't a little confusing as to like the order of operations in reading these out. Like if you fulfill the mission but also get the optional objectives, you've got 2 to read out, like what order do I resolve those in? Bit of flipping back and forth, but that's mostly a sort of a UI issue, I think. Yeah, so you did play a mission of this. I'm not sure what you thought of that I know you didn't see much of the structure, but you did see some of the narrative.
Was that the very first mission, or was that like a tutorial level?
Yeah, that was the first.
So, it does a pretty good job of introducing you to the system. Like, I feel like, as you would expect for a tutorial mission, the stakes weren't that high. Kind of just drop into a scenario. No spoilers here, by the way, because it was kind of a very surface level mission. You have your squad, typical characters from the original Mass Effect game entry, and you just get dropped into a scenario. There's baddies, there's kind of targets that you have to interact with. And by the way, this is like a minis on a grid board game, and very much like your Gloomhavens, and there's the other board on a book games that I think
Plaid Hat
kind of innovated early on, and of course is de rigueur now in adventure style games. But but it's the adventure game in a box sort of overall genre that is made popular by other systems like obviously aforementioned Gloomhaven and games like Descent as well. But I feel like it wasn't really heavy. The map was pretty compact, and it played pretty smoothly.
To double down on that overall structure, if you fail a mission, you are going to carry forward. Fail forward, that is. There's no repeating a mission, so there is a sort of a forward momentum. Ultimately, the end stakes is that the war readiness track, which was a classic in the game. Obviously, you're ticking off that over the course of the missions, and how many you have at the end of the game is going to dictate basically your result in the narrative book at the end, which I wasn't particularly excited by. Like, just seeing a track go up, and high score is never really a motivating factor for me. I would have rathered a more narrative framing of your choices throughout the campaign. There aren't many choices other than what mission are you going to do? Are you going to go blow up the reactor, or are you going to go download the data, basically, and things like that. You're not giving much overall context for what you're attempting to do here.
Yeah, I think it's trying to ape like kind of the overall structure of the entire video game series, but obviously it doesn't echo the moment to moment instances, or really like kind of like the interstitial scenes, like the I'm curious to ask you on the Normandy, like that's kind of like a big part of the video game series. Is there downtime per se?
Not really, no. Other than those loyalty missions, but those are still within that same setting, and like so, each character has discovers some information that is of particular interest to them within this setting, which is all like a downed Cerberus ship, I believe.
Right.
So that the narrative, I think, I mean, from my introduction, you might sense that I've sort of staged my feelings on the writing in this world more broadly. That is to say, I think the narrative, what narrative is in this board game, does capture that Mass Effect sort of oeuvre pretty well. Like, reading through all, the dialogue and all the wisecracks, and I can feel those characters. I can hear their voice in a very responsive way. Like that does come across really well. Regardless of whether it works for me or not, I think if you're a fan of that universe, you're going to gel with this pretty well. The characters are very recognizable, shall we say.
Yeah, that's the sense I got as well, is that people that are into the media property Mass Effect will probably not be disappointed. I don't know, where they're coming from, whether they're already tabletop players or just video game fans, but, they'll feel the familiarity. They will, get something that emulates part of the video game, the pretty broad video game series that is Mass Effect. Obviously, it's not doing the intense relationship simulator,
or romance
minigames, or it does a little bit of the Renegade Paragon stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that, because, like, to you, what does that binary represent?
To me, what it represents, let's be clear, what this is echoing is kind of more morality systems of the past. So previous games like even previous BioWare games like KOTOR, Knights of the Old
Yes.
Republic series, which Mass Effect kind of built upon the shoulders of the KOTOR series. In KOTOR, it was light versus dark, as is a very common Star Wars trope. But Renegade versus Paragon it's not that you're bad, it's more that you're kind of goody-goody or that you're smarmy smartass, in my opinion. So that's the way I played it in the video games, is I would play the Renegade all the time because I'm a smarmy smartass, right? I don't want to be a goody-goody.
On my most recent playthrough of Mass Effect 2, I was surprised to find how much the Paragon came across as a bit of an authoritarian and just following the rules to like
Space cops
to a fault, basically. Yeah. And the Renegade was like following the greater good, basically, and breaking the rules for the sake of other people's benefit, basically.
Yeah, fighting for the little guy, and also just kind of like that sort of Captain Kirk style. Like I'm the decider. I'm the decider of what's good for people. Consequences be damned.
And be willing to say that the law is bullshit if you think so, right? So I can appreciate that there is some nuance. I don't know if the game always understands that nuance is there, I will say. But all that to say, in the board game, I think those decisions are basically represented by the Paragon will usually give you some objective that's getting to a terminal, like some kind of escort mission. Like go to this objective marker, download the codes, and then take an action multiple times to input the codes. The Renegade option most of the time seemed to be kill this enemy, which wasn't the most interesting sort of binary. It was more long-term goals versus short-term benefits. Just standing in one spot and shooting the enemy full of bullets, not the most engaging way of interacting with the game.
I feel like that doesn't exactly capture the spirit of Paragon versus Renegade. I feel like that maps more closely to the disparate gameplay styles in other kind of adventure games like the Deus Ex series, where the Deus Ex series mechanically asked you to either sneak around, interact with the environment,
like Dishonored, the high chaos, low chaos,
right?
Sort
exactly.
of,
Or the opposite within Deus Ex is go guns blazing, right? Like it's gameplay wise distinct, but that doesn't really say much about moral choices or personality, right? They're kind of mapping that duality on something else, which I get.
I do think
board game.
Yeah, I do think there was a missed opportunity, especially with that narrative book, to have given some narrative moral context to that binary.
Was there a lot of character development? Not character like, oh, turns out his long lost sister came around, but like, was there actually like leveling up or
so
growing?
I mean, let's get into the actual tactics of this game. In that each character, there's 5 of them. You've got Shepard in both varieties. You've got Liara, Garrus, Rex, and Tali. Curiously, you always play with 4 characters, and there's only 5. So someone's going to be the 5th wheel every time. It's a little strange that there's just one person left out. But that aside, each of those characters has basically multiple, usually somewhere between 6 and 9 abilities. They'll start out with 2 to 3 unlocked, and over the course of each mission, you can unlock more. Basically, every time you kill 3 enemies on a mission, you unlock something. There's some loot icons you can pick up that will give you some experience, and there's sometimes as an endgame reward for certain conditions, you'll also get an experience.
Right. Obviously, me having only played one mission, I didn't really get to experience the overall growth. But did you find that to be satisfying, or like worth your time?
Yeah, I mean, for one thing, I think those characters are all pretty expressive of their playstyle. Garrus likes shooting things from far away. He deals more damage to enemies that are 3 or more spaces away. Rex likes shooting things up close. He deals more damage if enemies are within 3 units. So that's a pretty organic way of character expressivity right there. As you start layering on these new abilities, that gets stronger. Garrus gets like these motion sensor bombs as an enemy comes in, comes adjacent to you, you can blow them up, or has the ability to aim and basically take more time to build up this aim meter that he can then spend to get like one big super shot. Liara has a lot of debuff effects that she can be more liberal with as she starts unlocking more abilities. So there is quite a bit of expressivity within all of those characters. Whether you get a chance to use them all remains to be seen. I think Tali really suffers from this in that her abilities were all about managing turrets. She could hack turrets and hack enemies. Of the 5 missions I played, 2 had turrets.
Yeah, I believe Tali, who was on my squad, my part of the squad, had a personal drone as well that you could utilize to affect things in the game world.
So every character also has this secondary ability that activates when you roll a certain symbol on the dice. I guess I should explain the dice system is that each turn you're going to be rolling a handful of dice. The first player will roll 12, and then you take 3 dice from the pool to take actions with those dice. The next character gets 9 dice and so on until the last person in turn order only has 3 dice. So they're going to have not very many options, essentially. That does create this natural flow state of everyone getting a chance to shine. Like, almost a little bit of the cooldown mechanic in the video game, I guess. But everyone gets one shot where they roll all the dice and get to take whatever they want, which is an organic system of, like, limiting your options. I didn't found that the friction entirely worked because either you have all of the options and you can just take whatever you want, or you don't have any at all. And so many times, even when I was rolling like 9 dice, I roll all movements and no attacks, or vice versa. And then that round was a bit of a bust, unfortunately. So it's an interesting system. I don't think it entirely works. Especially with, like I was saying, Tali, one of those symbols on the dice is stars, and she gets to move her drone. And even if she gets those stars to move the drone does 1 damage. Like, it's very situational as to whether you really get to fire it off. I think Tali really suffered the most from a lot of the situational factors really stacking up on top of each other.
Right. I think Shepard, the other guy on my squad, or the gal, because of course, FemShep all the way. Of course. Her ability was only to kind of like upgrade certain dice results, so it felt like, thematic on point is I'm helping the squad out, but also didn't feel super cool to
wasn't
execute.
Exciting.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so each of these abilities basically has a dice slots that you can plug a dice into to use. Like everyone has a couple of movement slots, so you can put a movement dice there as a movement action. So to attack, you have to have an action that lets you take an attack action and then slot a dice into it. Sometimes you might only have 1 attack, like Liara can only shoot once basically at the start of the game, and then she can't really do much beyond that. Shepard can attack more often. He's got like at least 2 slots at the start, and potentially more as you go, but you really are quite constrained. And I think it's a really tight balance in tactical games to provide these restrictions and limitations to sort of provide a challenge, obviously, but also still giving you an opportunity to express yourself and be creative and clever in how you approach those limitations. And I think this falls a little too hard on the restrictive side, unfortunately.
Did the maps get larger or more exciting as the game proceeded? Because the first one felt a little cramped.
Yeah, I mean, obviously every map is only going to be on 1 page of the campaign book. Some of them are more interesting than others. What I really struggled with was the tight hallways. Most of all of the Paragon objectives usually meant you going down a tight hallway to get to a terminal. And just about every time the boss would activate next to that terminal, I can't move through the boss, so I've got to stand back outside, try and kite them out, but it's random as to when that boss will activate. And if I don't roll the movement at the right time, then I'm waiting a whole other round to try that again. And so it was a lot of just like getting stuck in the corridor, like, Austin Powers, and like being unable to move past each other, basically.
Yeah, I don't play a lot of them that have come out, but I'm getting a little tired of that game map in book format with the coil bound spine so that it can lay flat. I think originally when it first came out, that was a really smart idea, but because
it is elegant.
Yeah, due to the limitations on just the initial size of the book, I think that you run into kind of inherent choke points there. Now, on the flip side, for TTRPGs, because I'm a fan, I know that they put out books that, for instance, you could buy two of, and they are identical books, but because you can have flip to different scenes, you can have like one open splayed out
Mm.
section and align it with another splayed out section, which is a different section, so you can really create a more expansive area and have a much more varied
I've
experience
got
as well.
Tidal Blades 2 on the table right now, which does exactly that, basically.
Very cool.
Yeah, I don't. The small board state isn't the issue here. I think it's more just the restrictiveness of how you can move and interact. And like what I was really missing so many times was an opportunity to move both allies and enemies alike. Like, not to compare to other tactics, but we played a little bit of Thunderfolk last week, which was very permissive in letting you move allies and enemies and manipulating the board state in that way. And I think something like that would have helped a lot. Like you have force push or whatever it's called in Mass Effect, right? That would have been really useful here to manipulate the state and just expedite some of those movement issues here. And like that was one of the last missions had a bunch of fire on the map. Like, don't stand in the fire, it will take a damage. There was no reason for anyone to ever stand in the fire. It didn't come up at all.
Right. So it sounds like there are some interesting parts, but maybe like just like the melding of them doesn't exactly jive perfectly every time.
I will say, I mean, I don't want this to be completely negative. Line of sight, I think, is pretty elegant here. Basically, it's on a hex grid, right? And line of sight is basically in a straight line along any of those directions, unless you hit a wall or an obstacle of some kind. So you don't have to get rulers out. There's no edge cases really. It's just, can you shoot in a straight line? That was pretty simple.
Right. Yeah. What I felt about the limited experience that I have, what is that? It was a fairly rudimentary, tactical game, but it was pretty smooth to play and effective for what it was trying to accomplish.
Yeah, look, I think ultimately, if you're a fan of Mass Effect, the characters and setting is going to get you most of the way there, and the accessibility is pretty high. You're going to have a good time with this. What comes to mind for me is, video games have this term called the vertical slice, usually in the sense of E3 demos, where you get a little bit of everything in the game. You got a little bit of shooting, a little bit of some hacking mini games, some wisecracking, some familiar faces, and usually a cliffhanger at the end where you leads into the marketing for the game. A little bit of everything. This feels exactly like that. You got a little bit of all the Mass Effect experiences, but unfortunately, like a cross section, there's not much depth to any one of those things. Unfortunately.
Right, but there's big possibility for expansion and layering things on top of the space.
I do have a lot of respect for a game willing to show restraints, and rather than this huge box of minis, but then you can add on to that with smaller experiences and add a little bit of the time to flesh this out. A couple more characters, I think, would add a lot to this.
Very nice. Okay, so that is a Mass Effect Priority Hagalaz. Got it.
Anyone craving ice cream?
There you go. Okay, moving on then, if that's all right. I'm going to talk about my segment, my course, my main course, which happens to be two smaller courses. So played a trick on you there. Who knows? Maybe I only get to talk about one because I know we're going a little long here as it is. So I'll start with the first one. This is a shorter game, which I brought back from Japan by a Japanese designer. That's going to be the case for both of them that I cover. But let's start with the first one and the older one, which is Harvest from 1992. That's not to be confused with newer editions of Harvest. They may have come out more recently in the West. This is Harvest from Japan, and it has been re-implemented, so I'll share the new name shortly. So this is a game for 1 to 6 players. Its playtime is around 20 minutes. And the designer is a person called Yukihito Morikawa. And artist for the original edition is Osamu Inoue. Published by 4 Games in Japan. If you're curious, the North American edition is from Aiello. It's going to be recalled Veggie Match. presumably because those other games called Harvest
There's
exist.
like 4 games called Harvest. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And that's
Even though this one was first.
yeah, and that's still coming out in the future. It says
I mean,
2025.
BGG says 2025. That's all I know.
Okay, so it has or is coming out soon. Anyways, so this is a very simple game to explain and a very simple game to play. Its complexity sits around like 1 on BGG, for instance. So basically, it's a match 3 puzzle game. Think about, think about games like Bejeweled.
Candy Crush.
Or Candy Crush. It's basically that, except you're placing one crop at a time on these very tiny garden boards. And each player has a 2x2 space board. So very, very small. And the individual crop cards are very small as well. In fact, we'll share the story about how this game kind of was originally designed in a bit. But because you can only score sets of 3 or more, and they have to be in lines, either horizontally, vertically, or, yes, diagonally, you cannot score just on your board. There are a couple of edge cases where you can score just on your board, but essentially you are most likely going to be scoring positive or negative points for yourself and at least one other player. So that's where the kind of like inherent tension comes in. I just hinted that the crop cards, of which there are 3 varieties, tomato, lettuce, and corn, basically just 3 different colors. They don't really vary that greatly. Each have a range of point values from, I think it's from 10 points, 20 points, all the way up to 30 points. No, 40.
40.
There's a 140, I believe, in each color. And there's a bunch of negatives as well. There's negative 10s, negative 20s. I think the ILO version smartly divides all the points by 10 because those extra zeros don't matter.
Less math. Yeah.
Exactly. So quite often you have to, on your turn, you're placing one crop card, which is a tiny little square, like kind of postage stamp size almost. You have to place it on your board if your board is empty. You may place it on another player's board if that board is not empty, and you have at least one card on your board. And likewise for the other players. You cannot place a card on another player's board if it is empty. But otherwise, it's pretty much wild. And the boards, like I said before, they're 2x2, and they're going to be placed as evenly as possible, touching sides of another player's board. For 2 people, you add a third neutral board. For 3 people, it's a little bit awkward because you have to play it
T-shape
in this triangular shape, but one of the boards is going to be touching fewer sides than the other 2 boards.
It is one of those games where you kind of self-balancing each other in terms of king making and who you can attack and things like that.
That's very true. And also, you can play it with varying skill levels. Either you're introducing new players who haven't played before, or maybe you're playing with adults versus children, for instance. That could be done easily as well because, like you said, you adjust kind of the severity of the attacks based on the number of the types of people that are playing.
I was playing with my daughter today and definitely pulled a couple of punches.
Ah, there you go. Yeah, so like I said, you might have a scenario where you, over the course of multiple turns, place 2 green crops on your side of the board, and they happen to be positive, and then the other player just sees an opportunity. They're going to play a green crop on their board, touching your 2. You create a line.
Everyone wins.
Both parties score the positive points for only the cards that are on their boards. So it's very easy to score. You just literally take the crops that just scored, put them in front of you as the score keeping. Couldn't be more elegant than that. But there are a couple of twists. Like, there are negative scoring points in every crop color. So there's negative points for green, yellow, and red. And there's a couple of these unique cards as well that mix things up. One type is called the Tornadoes, and there's 3 of those in the deck. And that can create a set it counts as a wild crop. It has to be added to at least 2 other crops to create a valid set. So once again, in a line. But it causes all of those crops to not score at all. They get discarded. So the cool thing about that is that they can be played. They could be played offensively or defensively. So if you play it when a player is just about to score mucho points, you can deny them those points. Or if you have a bunch of negatives on your board, you can cause a set to be created, obliterating the negative points and possibly the positive points on someone else's board. So very, very smart implementation there. And the one other type of card is like Tornado, except it causes the set to complete. All the cards that have points score, except the Harvest card does not score. It's just a wild in case you don't have that particular color. So I've talked about the rules at length, but this is a very kind of light, easy flowing game, and it's like super casual, I say. But I think there's still an element of fun to be had there. So Daniel, you and I played this just yesterday and at least one more other time before that. What do you think about Harvest?
Yeah, well, I mean, I am the one who put you onto this. I was introduced to this by my friend Des. I talked about it briefly on the vacation episode where I talked about the games I was playing in Australia. I was introduced to it there and then suggested that you try to track it down in Japan, which thankfully you did. And yeah, it's a great little game. Very easy to learn. It's got that sort of passive-aggressive interaction that you can take it in multiple directions. You can basically form alliances and really double down on like making plans as to what's going to go where, or you could just play it pretty fast and loose, which is how we did, or just really lean into that aggressive playing negative points as much as possible. I know I was getting fed a lot of negative points, even though I was clearly losing the game. Maybe there was some hard feelings from the previous game we played there.
I believe the phrase is "you reap what you sow." So I think you were doing some mild jabs here and there, even in the game Harvest.
Yeah, but this is a great little game, and you can get quite clever because you harvest if there's 3 or more matching cards. So you could form groups of 4, or even like these weird sort of T intersections of cards. I've not seen that, but it is absolutely possible if you're playing really strategically.
Yeah, and most games like this don't really allow diagonals. And one of the players we were playing with, I think it was Pat, took advantage of the diagonals because basically, like, I wasn't paying attention.
You can get quite sneaky with that, yeah.
So I didn't even see a line coming, but he saw it because he was, had a bead on that move. So some of those moves came out of the blue. And I think this game is like highly adaptable, like you said, to pretty much any group. Because, like you say, if you're playing with younger people or novices, you just kind of pull your punches more. And furthermore, if the table feels like one of the players is taking a strong lead, then all the attacks go to them. So you adjust. So a very fast and fluid game. Like I said, it doesn't take very long, about 20 minutes. And there are some interesting edge cases which highly vary the kind of the flow of the game. Because if one player's board ends up kind of piling up with these mismatching scenarios, it actually kind of disrupts things quite a bit. So you can kind of like sabotage a player or help yourself, and that kind of drastically changes the board state. There are some edge cases that cause you to not be able to play. There are cases where, for instance, you started out with a bunch of positive points, maybe a balance of positive and negative, and then because you're just have been holding those negatives back, you end up with all 4 negative
play
cards.
them into your own, yeah.
And if your board is empty, you have to play it in your own. So really smart cases there. Anyways, that's the game. I wanted to talk a little bit about the designer of this game, which
there's a cool story there.
I read a little bit about. Like I said, this game is like 30 plus years old, and no one really talked about it outside of Japan, except until recently, of course, the new edition.
I think it's 2023 this edition came out.
Yeah, this edition in Japan came out in 2022 or 3. The North American one will come out in 2025. And the designer of this says in the English rules, in Japanese rules as well, if you can read it, said that my senpai at university and the current president of Pokemon Inc. asked me to create a board game, and Harvest was the game I created.
It's an
So
incredible "my senpai works for Nintendo" moment.
yeah, exactly. Very few people can say that, I presume. So my inclination was, oh, this guy must work in the video game industry. Did a bit of research, and apparently he does. He was born in 1959, so this guy is, 20 years older than me. He's worked on TV shows. He's done CG art. He has created video games of his own. Most notably, a title from 1997 called Good Luck Morikawa-kun, number 2. Probably a kind of an indie title. And Astronoka, 1998. He's won a jury recommendation award for this arts festival entry in 2004. He won a Da Vinci ebook grand prize for his book The Marriage of Nukaka. So this guy is like a polymath. He's been everywhere.
Wow.
And he has also been working in the AI space, but from like early on, from the 1970s.
Well,
so.
yes, I don't know what that means, especially in video games. AI could mean something very different.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he's not exactly the new generation of AI tech bro, but he is working in that space as well. So really fascinating character. And once again, that's his name is Yukihito Morikawa.
And as far as I know, this is the only board game he ever designed, and it was only for sale at like train stations, designed to be played on like the tiny little tables on a bullet train.
Yeah, well, that's what the another part of the rule book says. If you read this little story from the editor, which is really interesting because you don't really think of editor other than rule book editor in North American audiences, but board
Probably
game...
like game development, I think,
Sure.
is what we would think of in the West.
Yeah, but it says in the rule book, it says editor, which I thought was really interesting. And the editor says, when I was in elementary school, I bought a card game at a train station on a family vacation, and that game was Harvest. And when I was asked to reproduce this latest edition in 2023, I opened up my family copy of Harvest, and it still had the train tickets from that trip inside the box. So really touching story there. I think it's kind of cool when an old classic gets resurrected and gets revealed to new audiences.
Yeah,
So
it's a nice little cultural artifact with a great story behind it. I know at least one of my friends who was playing it with this yesterday was looking up how to source a copy of this. I'm not exactly sure when Vegemite will be hitting shelves in the West, but keep an eye out for it for sure.
that's right. So that's a Veggie Match from ILO coming in 2025. And if you're in Japan, you can get this. I found it at Yellow Submarine, I think, for pretty inexpensive. It's a small box,
I bet.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, tiny box, like palm of your hand size. Very, very portable. So I'm going to hold off on my next game, but I'll give you a preview. It'll be a card game called Nana from Kaya Miyano, another Japanese small box card game, and this one has also been re-implemented in North America. So let's move on and talk about dessert.
Yeah. Do you want to start us off this week, Mark?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, go
Okay.
ahead.
So my dessert again is a manga. I'm sorry, I repeat week to week. I'm doing another manga this time. That's the media I most watch because I can consume it on my own.
We go through cycles of this too. So
Yeah, novels take longer to read for me. TV shows, I have to fight for the screen. But manga, I can read it pretty much whenever I want to. All right, so this manga is a romance manga called Kaguya-sama, Love is War. It's been around for a while. It was first published in Japan in 2015, and it ran in Miracle Jump, which is a seinen manga for I think teens to young adults, and later moved to Young Jump until the run ended in 2022, so fairly recently, and ran for many, many years. It was ultimately collected in 28 volumes, 28 basically digest books, which is like super long for romances. And romance manga generally are shorter than that. Sometimes they go 5 volumes. Sometimes they go 10 volumes. So 28 is super long. So that's makes it stand out.
And how deep in are you?
I thought, oh, geez, I must be reaching the end pretty soon. Once I reached like chapter 115 or so, and then I found out I'm not even halfway there. It has almost 300 chapters. Okay, so what makes this stand out? I read a decent range of manga from all sorts of genres. I'm not ashamed to say that I really enjoy romance manga. But in Japan, there's like romance manga of all different stripes. As you would expect, lots of them are oriented to female audiences, young or old, girls or women. But lots of them are also aimed at men or typical male presenting audiences. And the typical male oriented romantic comedy, this one is a comedy. They're not always comedies, but this one is a rom-com. The typical one has like this very, very normal, kind of uninteresting protagonist, and he's always surrounded by a bevy of attractive young ladies who love him for some reason, and it always feels very unearned. Basically, it's this like young male fantasy, and these books are oriented towards young males. So, of course, I get it. Those are the tropes. But this one kind of circumvents a lot of the tropes in a bunch of different ways. First of all, the primary love interest, Kaguya-sama, is one of them, the young lady, and Miyuki is her love interest. They're in love with each other from the very first chapter, and they both have a pretty good inclination that the other is in love with them too. So that's different for one. Most of the time, the series goes on and on for years, in dozens of chapters without Senpai ever noticing me or whatever it is in that particular scenario. But these two are, as the title indicates, essentially at war with each other from chapter 1 forward. This is a very like kind of cerebral manga. Strangely enough, Love is War is the subtitle of it. The main love interests are always trying to win over the other. They're trying to defeat the other because
Psychological warfare.
yeah, psychological warfare is underlining this entire story. Well, first of all, they're teenagers. They are members of the student council of an elite high school. The Kaguya-sama is like the heiress of a kind of like large Japanese multinational corporation. So she's essentially a princess, like just a whole untouchable different class. And Miyuki is basically a commoner. He's in this academy as a scholarship student, and he comes from a poor family, and the only way he's got here is by working himself to the bone. So already kind of opposites attract, and they both respect each other a great deal. And they're both whip smart, obviously, because they're on the student council, and they have to be collaborators. But in their opinion, whoever admits that they love each other first loses the war. They lose face. It's ultimate victory. What they want the most, they can't ever
Very stable base to relationship.
Exactly. These characters are really kind of warped in the head, and the storylines are very kind of wild and wacky as a result. So the game, it's basically a game of cat and mouse every episode, or a game of 3D chess. They even, at the end of every chapter, declare who the winner is of that particular battle.
It's like spy versus spy.
Yeah, it's absolutely hilarious as a result. And they do a lot of like tropey things. You know, there's the school festival, and then there's the school trip, and all these kind of typical Japanese high school romance tropes and situations happen, but they really circumvent a lot of what you would expect to happen. And there's a bunch of off-the-wall kind of standalone episodes where they go to different places, and really interesting places, strange, unexpected places. Like the president of the student council has to learn how to rap for some reason, and there's an entire chapter about how rap is art. So unexpected twists and turns there. And the story really goes to like kind of Shakespearean levels, right? It's kind of like Taming of the Shrew as something or something of that level because
Mm.
the characters are the love interests are whip smart and they love each other, but they just can't get there because of
Very
their
barbed in the
pride.
interactions, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Mm.
And eventually the storyline expands, the cast grows, some of the side characters get their own moment in the spotlight. So it's absolutely delightful reading this, and I've been reading like a bunch of chapters of that. To answer your hidden question, there is a TV anime adaptation of this,
Hmm.
36 episodes. I think it might be on
Wow.
Netflix. And there was even a feature film.
Oh, cool.
And there is a animated television special planned for that was just announced in June of 2025. So this is 3 years after the manga series ended. So there's still some interest in Kaguya-sama Love is War. I highly recommend it if you want a twist, and it's available on the North American Shonen Jump digital app or
Very cool.
trade paperback.
Awesome.
Very good. That's it for me. How about yourself, Daniel?
Yeah, well, I've also got a comic and a bit of a different style here, though I think you might have some experience with this one too. I've been reading a graphic novel called Ginger Roots. So this is by Craig Thompson, who I believe is known from some other sort of large graphic novels, Blankets and Habibi. And this was basically being released as individual issues. And then this just in this last month has been re-released as a this giant tome collating all of the issues together. And I happened upon it at the library. I think I'm literally the first person to have borrowed it. This collection is brand new, so I picked it up on a whim, but I was absolutely fascinated from beginning to end here. So this is basically following the author, part memoir, part sort of cultural historical exploration of the ginseng trade, you might be surprised to hear, based in Wisconsin. Specifically, the city of Marathon. He's this young, white, poor family growing up in rural Wisconsin. And his family and everyone he knows are all basically ginseng farmers. It does jump into the some of the backgrounds and basically how, like, I think it was in the 60s, China's sort of industrialization had sort of destroyed a lot of the agricultural trade there, and so America and other countries started to picking up the slack there. There's only a very brief reference to Canada, basically, also having its own ginseng trade and basically sort of poaching some of the American trade. So some hard feelings there, I think. But this covers so many different topics from his own experience growing up and the experience of those farmers, and obviously, as you can imagine, largely white conservative Americans, and some of the friction there between these farmers struggling with the effects of climate change and these unregulated chemicals being drenched everywhere, bristling against any suggestion that government might regulate or dictate what they're allowed to do. And I think he does balance this really fascinating way of, like, not exactly criticizing them, but showing that ugly side of their beliefs while also having empathy for their struggles. I mean, his own family were evangelical Christians. There was literally a reference to James Dobson, who was just died last week, and who was like who was like a huge advocate for, like, corporal punishment on children, basically, and growing up in this evangelical church. And I think Blankets, his first novel, was largely about him becoming disillusioned with that. So it does show the ugly side, but also a lot of compassion for these people as well. But from there, it also launches into the sort of the cultural history and mythology of ginseng in China, in Korea. There's a whole chapter dedicated to that. And I mean, it flows pretty seamlessly between sort of the personal memoir and this sort of cultural exploration. And a lot of people, I think, struggled with this being unfocused, and I just found it pretty flowing seamlessly back and forth to be really engaging somehow. It's not focusing on one specific thing. It's covering this very broad brush, but giving you so many little fascinating tidbits along the way. Beautifully illustrated. There's basically like you have these full page illustrations, or like multiple illustrations sort of melting into each other with like these symbolic depictions and infographics. And only a few colors. Like it's basically black and various shades of red, but he uses those colors to like some incredible points of effect and emphasis, like the red representing the ghost versions of his childhood and things like that. I know you've read some of this, Mark. What did you think?
Yeah, I was really interested to see the trade publication that you brought out, because I had read the first 6 chapters of the comic, and I actually thought that was all there was. But the volume you had was incredibly thick, and it turns out that you told me that there's 12 or so chapters or something. So the Vancouver Public Library system really has to get the remaining 7, or I need to pick up the new volume. But I thought it was really fascinating, and I agree with pretty much all of your points. It's incredibly compelling stuff. But I disagree in that I feel like the small volumes, the small individual chapters, did feel somewhat focused. Probably because they were smaller. So they mostly covered a theme. But overall, the work is all about contrast, right? It's baked in right from the beginning. It's kind of like East versus West. It's kind of like poor versus rich.
Small farmers versus these huge industrialized farming initiatives.
The past versus the present. So it's a really interesting dynamic story. I agree with you that the art is fantastic, and I was initially apprehensive because, being a person that was born in Asia, I worry about some of those materials being interpreted by Western people, but clearly this is like incredibly well researched.
And you see later in one of the later chapters, he explicitly grapples with that, like whether he should even cover it at all as a Caucasian guy.
Well, everyone has a perspective, and I still believe that.
He literally grew up with it. This was his childhood, like working for 10 years on the farm growing ginseng.
Right, and this isn't, yeah, exactly. This isn't some rich kid of an industrial farming family. This kid, like, picked ginseng, incredibly hard work by hand as a child, and that's part of his upbringing. So I think it is a really personal and fascinating story. I'm really interested in kind of economics and international trade, especially where it comes to food. So this kind of covers all those bases really, really well. And I can't say enough good stuff about the art, the layout. It's super unconventional, but super effective at the same time. I'm interested to try out his other series.
Yeah, I'll definitely be doubling back. But he does provide a lot of perspectives from other farmers and people from across the globe, and like the various perspectives on ginseng. Perhaps one of the most interesting I found was actually exploring I think it's pronounced Hmong people from Laos, basically, who were heavily involved in the Vietnam War, and explores how they were exploited by the Americans as allies during that war, and then what the few that survived and immigrated to America now being exploited by farmers there. And there's a whole chapter dedicated to them, basically, and how they're working on these ginseng farms, which part of history that I wasn't familiar with, but was fascinating and terrifying, to be honest.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, you're reading biography. I've read a couple of memoirs, and we talked about in the last couple of chapters, and I think it's important to read these stories because, unlike just kind of straight history books, they provide kind of a unique perspective and a more kind of emotional, personal perspective on world history that you really don't get from, history class or history
history
podcasts.
Sideways, and sort of provides this arrow into the heart of it.
It gives you a way into a story that might otherwise be hard to kind of grapple just on an intellectual level, because of the narrative aspect and the biographic aspect. Yeah, really good. Very cool. All right, we had a couple of 3 multiple filling courses right there. more to talk about in the future. All right, so let's share how the people can get in touch with us.
Yeah, if you have any questions or comments or suggestions for us, you can contact us at omnigamersclub@gmail.com or at our website, omnigamers.club.
That's right. You can check out our videos. We put out video versions of each episode that are coming out. If you want to check out our back catalog, you can find our early episodes only in audio form on a podcatcher of your choosing. And please, in both cases, send feedback. We love hearing your recommendations, your thoughts about the games and topics we're covering. Maybe you've read other works or played other games by the kind of creators that we're discussing. Always want to hear more about that because that educates us and makes it all the more rewarding to talk about this. We don't have any ads. We don't have a Patreon or anything like that. So just your feedback and your interaction is reward enough.
Absolutely. Always appreciate anyone who wants to join the club, and let us know what you think. You can find me at Board Game Feast over at Bluesky, and the Omnigamers Club account over on Bluesky as well.
Yeah, I'm also on Bluesky as Mark Usa, MarkYuasa, and I'm some other places as well, but I don't really follow those that closely. All right, so let's wrap it up there, and we
Fight
don't
120.
exactly. Yeah. I guess we have nothing to announce for the next episode, right?
Unless you're covering Nana, I guess.
All right, fine. I'll promise we'll be covering Nana at least in some degree tomorrow next episode.
Excellent. I'm not sure what I'm covering yet.
Cool. All right, folks. Well, that's it for now. Until next time. Hope you all have a balanced diet of games.
Bye.
Bye.